This is the best of the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, where we select from our library of hundreds of past presentations. One of our goals is to connect with people who have wonderfully interesting stories that inspire us to think about solutions to vexing problems in all sorts of ways. We hope you will find inspiration in what you hear today.
In 2009, I picked up a spinal cord injury. Doctor said that you are paralyzed neck downwards. For the rest of your life, you're going to be paralyzed. And you should probably, look at doing jobs from home, maybe file taxes for people and things like that. I could either complain about my life and be depressed about my life, but I started focusing on things that I could control, started strengthening my shoulders, biceps and all that stuff. In the first 1 week, nothing happened. In a month, nothing happened. But in 3 months' time, for the very first time, after those 2 years of accident and injury, I was able to move from the bed to wheelchair all by myself. I modified a car, which is a hand-operated car, and I picked up some competitive sports. Now, apart from being an athlete doing sports, I've been involved in assistive technologies as well. There are about 1 billion people with disabilities. And out of that 1 billion who actually need assistive devices, only 1 out of 10 people actually get access to assistive devices. The TTK Center for Rehabilitation, Research and Device Development, R2D2, in a snapshot, there are 11 upcoming products, but this far we've commercialized 4 different products.
Welcome, everybody. This is the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, and every week we bring you stories of people who are doing really interesting things the world over, making their communities all the more interesting and improving them in all sorts of wonderful ways, locally, globally, and digitally. And today we are talking with Justin Jesudas, who is in Madras in India, and we are very excited to have him talk to us about the work of the TTK Center for Rehabilitation Research and Device Development, also known as R2D2. This is a thanks, by the way, to one of our newest members, Casper Meyer, also in India, who made the connection. The Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley is part of Rotary International, 1.4 million people around the world who are working to improve the lives of others in all sorts of ways. And so we are excited to be one of the 36,000 clubs that are part of Rotary, and we love being able to share messages of innovation, education, and entrepreneurship. And along those lines, I would like to hand it over to our speaker. Justin, thank you so much for taking time to tell us about the work of R2D2, and we are very excited to pass the mic over to you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks, Casper, for introducing me. Really excited to be here and talk about our work, and I'll also talk about my journey, a little bit, so that it has a perspective, and I'm trying to personalize this conversation a little bit so that we understand the impact that the work really has. So I've had about 20 years of corporate experience with companies like UBS, Cognizant, and R2D2. A couple of years back, I decided I'm going to quit the corporate career and do something in the social innovation and disability space. That's primarily because about 13 years back, I picked up a spinal cord injury that left me paralyzed neck down. And ever since, I've been a wheelchair user. For me, it was a natural calling that I had to do something to make a difference in the lives of persons with disabilities, my peers, as much as it had an impact in me as well. During the process of understanding the changes that happened as I picked up a disability, because it all happened overnight, right, in a split second. During this journey of 13 years, I think I've explored a lot more than I did in the first 29 years of my life before I picked up this disability and this injury. And ever since, I've been, having 13 years of lived experience. I've been an athlete. I picked up sports after my injury, competitive sports. I competed at elite level at the Asian Games, World Championship. I've spent a good bit of time in the US as a diplomat, a sports diplomat for a sports exchange program as well. So if you look at the timeline, really, the first 29 years, I'd probably call it pretty much dull and boring, doing regular stuff. And in the last 13 years, it's been really exciting ever since I met with this accident in 2009. Now, apart from being an athlete doing sports, I've been involved in assistive technologies as well. The impact and the potential of assistive technology as a first-hand user. But not only as a user, in the last 7-8 years, I've been a consultant in providing design experience, design thinking from a user perspective. Because as engineers, especially as engineers from Premier Institute, but the device that they develop often do not, speak with the customers. When they come actually to the customer's hands, you realize, okay, this looks like a great engineering marvel or piece, but how useful is it? And often users start rejecting it because a lot of devices that you see around us, not necessarily assistive devices, you would probably realize that some of it is just a push onto the customers. And I think that's the reason why user-centric designs have started evolving. And a lot of engineers are now embracing user-centric design. Now, quickly, if I have to summarize the last 13 years, I break it into 4 different phases. One, the very first phase was the phase of uncertainty. I did not know what hit me. Here I was, doctor said that you are paralyzed neck downwards. For the rest of your life, you're going to be paralyzed. And you should probably, look at doing jobs from home, maybe file taxes for people and things like that. Now, I had an obvious choice here. I could either crib, complain about my life and be depressed about my life, or I can script my own story and, be the hero of my life. Luckily for me, I chose the latter, and that made a lot of difference. And secondly, usually what happens is when something so devastating happens in your life, the first question that you ask yourself is, why me? And I consciously said to myself, I'm not going to ask that question, because when fortunate things happen, you never ask yourself, why did this happen to me? You just count your blessings and move on. So I didn't want to ask that question. And I think that kept me going. At the end of that very first phase, which I call, the phase of uncertainty or the phase of total dependence, it ended by 2 realizations. One was, why am I focusing on things that I can't control anymore? I've been absolutely educated. I understood spinal cord injury, that the prognosis for a spinal cord injury is almost always poor. But despite that, I was only focusing on, when I'd be able to walk. So I started saying to myself, hey, how about focusing on shoulders that I have? They are 5 on 5, like anybody else. How about focusing on them? How about focusing on the biceps that I had, or the little residual triceps or wrist function that I have? And then I started manipulating a lot of things with the abilities that I had to function in a different way from others. And in the first 1 week, nothing happened. In a month, nothing happened. But in 3 months' time, for the very first time, after those 2 years of accident and injury, I was able to move from the bed to wheelchair all by myself. Until then, 2-3 people lifting me and things like that. The second realization was, I wasn't living my life. Somebody was always around me helping. And I wasn't letting people around me, my family, also live their lives, right? Because a spinal cord injury doesn't happen to the individual. It happens to the entire family. It's so devastating. So I wanted to consciously move away from that. So there started my second phase, the phase of interdependence, where I started focusing on things that I could control, started strengthening my shoulders, biceps, and all that stuff. I modified a car, which is a hand-operated car, and I drive it from my shoulder. Although, I clasp it with my hands, but the movement happens actually from the shoulder. I was able to drive a car. I drive on the same road, same potholes, same traffic, but I was still able to do it. And that's where equity comes in. And I'll talk about equity in a bit. When I started driving, when I started doing different things by myself, I started making agreements with my family and people around that, hey, I'll do this much for you. You do this much for me. That was the phase of interdependence. Then was the phase of independence, where I started exploring things little by little, just like how a baby or a toddler would, start crawling, then they would start holding things and walk, and then they would start walking by themselves. Similarly, this journey, of course, I didn't start walking, but I was starting to do different things by the use of assistive technology, right? Started using different devices to be able to do. Because for me, it was like, okay, a person without disability, they use their legs to move from point A to point B. I'm going to use a wheelchair to move from point A to point B. It's not about the leg or the wheelchair. The purpose of the functionality is to move from point A to point B. Similarly, I use adaptive clothing. I use a loop for a zipper, and I just put my finger in and I just, move the flyer. Or for a shave or for writing a pen, I just take a smiley ball, put a hole in it, put the pen inside it, and hold the smiley ball. As simple as that. And that's where the difference started happening. And the last phase I'd call as a phase of giving back. Because now we have 2 4-year-old adults. And I can't go and reason to them that I have a disability and I can't do all of these things. I have to still play the perfect father. I have to play the son. What is important is often people with disability sometimes don't realize that despite a disability, they have the same roles to play, the community role. It could be a father, it could be a son, it could be a citizen, it could be a friend, it could be a colleague. Disability should not stop. And that's where, assistive technology come in play. A lot of people usually say, what, it's like great attitude is what is important. The only disability is negative attitude, which is fine. But when I go in front of a flight of stairs and I say, hey, I have a great attitude, how about me just, going up the stairs? It's not going to happen. That equity, social equity needs to be there. And often what happens is that's not there in the community. And that's where technology comes and plays a big, big, big role. If you look at disability per se, the magnitude of disability across the globe, there are about 1 billion people with disabilities. And out of that 1 billion who actually need assistive devices, only 1 out of 10 people actually get access to assistive devices. And this is even more poorer and dearer in the developing countries or underdeveloped countries. There are more people who actually need it and they just don't have it. So on that note, if you look at the assistive technology landscape, the area that we are working in from a mobility standpoint, there are 75 million users, potential users who actually need wheelchairs, out of which we're talking about less than 7 million actually having access to the right wheelchairs. So on and so forth. Different devices, there's still dirt, and a lot of things are not available, especially in the developing countries and underdeveloped countries. A lot of the devices that are developed in the Western hemisphere don't even reach our shores. And if they have to reach, they come with a huge price tag. We're talking about, several $1,000s and include shipping as well and customs as well. And it's really, really difficult scenario. So that's where, and that's really the problem statement. And that's where our center comes in play, right? We're talking about the TTK Center for Rehabilitation Research and Device Development, R2D2. In a snapshot, we've done about 63 research publications. We have about 22 patents filed or granted. This far in the last couple of years, with the devices that we've developed, 5,000 users have benefited. We've trained 1,500 clinicians. Why train? I'll get there in a bit. There are 11 upcoming products, but this far we've commercialized 4 different products. The standing wheelchair, a high performance wheelchair that can go 3 to 5 times faster than a conventional wheelchair, a clip-on, which we call NeoBolt, that bolts onto the wheelchair and quickly converts the wheelchair into a roadworthy scooter that can go, at a top speed of 25 kilometers per hour. We've limited that because rules and regulations say so. And then a polycentric knee. Now, polycentric knee and all of these devices, they're India first. For the first time, they've been developed in India indigenously. These have been in existence, in the Western hemisphere for about a decade or 2 decades, or probably more than in some cases, but they've never reached the developing nations or the underdeveloped nations. Cost is one barrier, technology is another barrier. But we not only develop these devices, but we also have, exhaustive testing mechanisms in our facility itself, because whatever we put, it can't be like a do-it-yourself project. It needs to have top-notch quality, and all of these testing facilities are, compliant to ISO standards. Because if you don't have them, there's no point. All of these devices, they are less than 40% or 30% of the cost of what these devices could potentially be in the Western hemisphere, in the US or in Western Europe. I think, really what we're trying to do is bridge the gap between quality and affordability for the users who can otherwise not access these devices. We work in a model called the GRID model. G stands for grants. We raise grants either from government or from corporate social responsibility, where in India, you have a legislation that the companies who make certain amount of revenue, they have to contribute 2% of their profit to social causes. We raise that. We do the research either independently or we join hands with any other organization and do the research. And then we hand over the license, the rights to mass manufacture these devices to an industry partner. That's the difference between a lot of academic research labs that are there that research and then leave it there. But we translate that to the community impact. And the last piece is, as a responsible institute, we not only want to develop devices that are world-class with top-notch quality, but educate the clinicians and the users. That's where in the last 1 year, we've educated about 1,500 clinicians on how to type assistive technologies, assistive devices. Unfortunately, in India, you don't need a prescription to hand over a wheelchair or device. In terms of the UN goals, SDGs, we directly impact about 4 different goals: providing good health and well-being for persons with disability, provide the innovation and infrastructure to actually develop these devices, reduce inequities in the community, and create all those partnerships in different places to bring the ecosystem together. Indirectly, we alleviate poverty, bring down hunger, provide quality access to quality education through the devices so that people can go to schools, colleges, and we also contribute to overall economic growth. On this point, every country loses about 5 to 7% of the GDP if they don't include people with disabilities. In Indian context, that's about $120 billion. That's the impact we create overall across all the SDGs. These are the devices that directly are out there in the market, create this impact. And overall, these are our users who are out there in the community who are making those changes and inspiring others to join as well. We have our own set of partners across NGOs, funding ecosystem, academic institutes, industries, medical organizations. And this is the team. This is the team that is creating all of this impact. So I think our goal is pretty singular. And we've been on this track for the last 7 years to improve the quality of life of persons with movement disabilities. I hope next time when we meet, we'd be able to do a virtual tour of the center.
Fantastic, Justin. Thank you so much. So in a minute, I'll hand it back to you for a final word, but let's do the standard wind down. We thank you for joining us and for helping us share the stories of those who seek to improve their communities, locally, globally, and digitally. We are part of Rotary International, 1.4 million Rotarians and Rotaractors in tens of thousands of clubs around the world. Our club is both online and always available, so you can attend one of our meetings at any time by choosing the link on our homepage, which you can find at rotary.cool. In our meetings archive, you can find the full recordings, including the Q&A between the speakers and participating members and guests. If you are interested in joining Rotary, are a former Rotarian looking to get back into the organization, or simply interested in how you might make a difference in the lives of others, take a look at the Join page on our site or at rotary.org. You can also find these links in the podcast show notes. As we always do, we hand it back to our speaker for a final thought. And so, Justin, why don't you go ahead and finish us off for the recording?
Sure. I just have 2 thoughts for all the audience. One is, I think world over, a lot of persons with disability, every day morning when they wake up, they find reasons to enable themselves. And often, unfortunately, what happens is the society and the setup around, they find excuses to disable them. So I think if the narrative changes there, it'll be great. Second, at R2D2, all that we're trying to do is simply change the narrative from disability to ability so that everybody has a fair chance in the world. And I think all of us deserve that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And everyone, thank you for joining us. We will see you next week.